She represented England at international level, was part of the squad that won both the 2009 Women's World Cup and World 2020, and has gone on to become one of the most respected voices in cricket broadcasting.
Maybe it was a bit loose in how I said it, but I was like, he's done. His career's over, you know. Going to the coach saying, like, I'm going to tank if I talk to the team like that. We think you're the first black woman to play cricket for England. And my first thought was dread. I was like, oh my God.
How do you actually implement that and really do something meaningful?
Moving into professional cricket, we've had 50,000 kids come through the programme. Once you get higher up, people want to know the numbers and the impact.
Welcome to the Power and Purpose podcast with me, Leon Mann, Troost-Ekong and Maro Itoje. This is the pod where we have great conversations about leadership with people who are shaping sport, culture and society. Today's guest is someone who has been hugely influential in the cricket world in so many ways. She represented England at international level, was part of the squad that won both the 2009 Women's World Cup and World 2020, and has gone on to become one of the most respected voices in cricket broadcasting. Beyond the media, she's also stepped into leadership roles within the game, serving on the board of the England and Wales Cricket Board and as Director of Women's Cricket at Surrey. But perhaps her most transformational work has come through founding the African Caribbean Engagement Programme, better known as ACE, an organisation working to address the decline of black participation in cricket and to create new opportunities for young people across the UK. So I am a big cricket fan, so I am well into this. I'm all over it. But Will, Maro, either of you cricket fans?
I think I have to be completely honest here. I played a little bit of cricket at school. So I went to a secondary school in the UK and we had a summer term where that was my introduction to cricket. But whenever I used to see the great big cricket lawns, I usually used to bring my ball and try to hit the longest diag I could ever do with my friends on there. So I haven't played too much myself. I used to watch a little bit on TV, of course, test matches or any of the big events. But no, so I'm really looking forward to actually speaking to Ebony and learning a bit more about her journey. I don't think I've ever watched women's cricket. So, but yeah, I read up on her, of course, as we always do on our briefs. And she's such an impressive young lady. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing more. But I do know that one of us has played a little bit more cricket. So Maro, let us know.
Well, I probably played a little bit more cricket than you, but only marginally. Cricket is not really, I'm not very good at cricket. However, I do love going to Lords or going to the Oval. I watched some great cricket games at Lords and the Oval, so that's something I do enjoy. But I do have a very particular technique. I call it eat the apple, climb the stairs, then follow through. It's gotten a few people out because weirdly enough, in rugby we actually play quite a lot of cricket. That guys normally play it as a bit of a warm up to before we warm up to get into it. So
do you get involved?
Sparingly.
Okay.
I'm at my stage, I'm spending a bit more time actually warming up than
with old boys.
Cricket. Yeah, exactly. But it's a game I have a lot of respect for.
Well, amazing. Let's get our guest on. Welcome to the podcast, Ebony Rainford-Brent. Ebony, thank you so much for joining us on Power and Purpose. We've just been discussing how much we've been looking forward to having you on with us. You cover so many areas that we have big interests in, from obviously doing your thing on the field, to broadcasting, to sitting in, like leading in boardrooms, to being out in the community, like making like serious moves and changing things. Like we're really, really fortunate to have you on. And I know our community is going to be buzzing about the conversation that is coming up. So thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you for having me. I'm only disappointed I don't have a branded mic, so I need to get one of those P&P numbers and I'm in the club with you guys. No, honestly, Leon, I've known you for a long time, and so great to be here. And of course, Maro and Will, I think we'll have a great conversation. And I want a branded mic. The top.
It's in the post as
Good.
you speak. It's in the post as you speak. So let's jump straight into it. So I've just kind of summarized, and we've given you the whole kind of like build up in our chat that we've just had. So we know your CV, right? So leadership expert, like but where did it all start? Like, you know, because you don't start your leadership journey, in the boardroom or in an international stadium necessarily, right? So, you know, was it through sport, family, school, or somewhere else entirely that you started your leadership journey? Give us a feel for that.
Yeah, I think I would describe myself very much as a reluctant leader. I've never wanted to lead. I had 3 older brothers, and I was the last in the family. Just let them crack on and kind of, you know, do as big brothers do. And I never really saw myself in any shape or form as a leader. I remember the first time I got given a leadership role, how old? I'd have been maybe 21, 22. So basically I was playing for Surrey Cricket, which is county cricket. And basically in those days, I think if you scored the most runs, they gave you captaincy, but that was nothing to do with whether you were skilled or not. And I don't know. I remember just this moment. It was actually an awful moment of like, I was hyped up. I'm giving this speech to the team, like, right, guys, let's take them down. You know, like this sort of high on motivational speech. And I just remember like everyone looking at me just chill out. Like, first of all, there was like a chill out. And then I'm like a couple who were like me in personality felt the excitement, but so many of the team didn't respond to that type of team talk. And it was the first time I kind of remember going to the coach saying like, I'm going to tank if I talk to the team like that. And he was like, well, you need to understand personalities. You need to at times be calm and measured. You need to provide a sort of a balanced approach. And it was the first time I realized I can't just be me if I want the team to follow. I have to understand people more. I have to understand the environment. And I kind of, over the years, have had to do that, you know, like understand people. I'm sure you guys have gone through that journey where you realize like just because you operate one way, if you want to work with others or get others to buy into where you're going, you kind of have to paint the picture, think about personality styles and all those sort of things. So yeah, that moment where I tanked maybe in my early 20s, you know, we did finally get promoted back to the next division, but then we went down again. You know what sport's like, guys. You know, you think you're winning and then it's quite hard in sport to stay at the top of your game. But that was the kind of moment I realized leadership for me needed work. It wasn't going to be a natural, organic thing.
Did you enjoy it at all?
I don't know, you know, even to today, you know, I've done a lot of things. I think it's like bittersweet. I feel like when you're winning, I love leadership. And there are just always problems when you're leading. And what I mean by that is managing people, managing the environment. You know, as I've got older and you're thinking about numbers, you've got to make sure everyone's getting paid in certain environments, you know, that pressure that comes with making sure everyone's okay. So I think when it's cruising and winning, there's nowhere else you want to be because you get to be at the forefront of driving something forward. But I think what sport does really well is it teaches you like resilience. So when it's not working, you know how to sort of default back, sort of work out a plan, strategize and get on with it and just kind of get on with it, whether it's a good emotion or not.
Often through adversity, often through experiencing setbacks and losses, I think you really get to know your teammates, your colleagues. So when you had periods where things weren't going according to plan, what were the kind of things that you look for, or you look for within yourself and you look for within your team, environment, colleagues, to kind of get you back on track?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the name of your podcast kind of sums some of it up, but I think purpose, sometimes it can sound corny, but it's mostly the most important thing, the why. Like, if you don't know why, your team doesn't know why, you're kind of on a bus or a train going somewhere and you don't quite know where you're going. And so I think when it gets harder, it's so nice, like, reuniting around a vision. And I remember I saw a good example of leadership when I joined the England team. Our first tour, we were maybe 4th in the world, and we went on this tournament. This was my first England tour ever to India, and we were playing the top 4. So it's Australia, England, India, New Zealand. We got battered in every single game. I remember being so depressed by it. And I remember Charlotte Edwards, who was our captain, at the end of the tournament was like, we've lost our why, we've lost our purpose. Like, what are we doing it for? And we all she forced us to go on this search, and we started singing this song, Take That, Never Forget. I mean, I didn't like Take That very much at the time, but I got down with the tunes. But we would sing it every time we won a game, is never forget where you're coming from, are the lyrics. And you reunited us, and on a period we then went on after that to win 2 World Cups, Ashes, like incredible. But the default thing that I learned from her and I take everywhere I go is like the why. You know, and I think in every single scenario that I've had to lead or been in a senior position, or even managing up, because at times you sometimes don't have the position, but you have to influence. I don't know. And I don't know if you guys feel that, but I feel like the why is the driver that gets you out of bed when you're not feeling it, you know, and that purpose is it. Leon, you've been around the block as well. I'm sure you've had to deal with the why and whether that actually motivates people or not, and drives people.
Yeah. No, I've held the licks and have had to go away and have a good think about purpose and drive. I haven't quite sang Take That, but I definitely have made a note of that here, because
That's where you're going wrong, Leon. That's where you're going wrong.
This is it. If I can get the Take That bang in, then I think no. But to answer your question seriously, and I'd be interested in Maro and Will's answers on this as well. I mean, you do learn so much from the difficult times about the people around you, about yourself, about the things that land with people, to get them to either change what they're doing or give you the feedback that you need to kind of correct some things maybe. So, you know, with the good times, and we are going to talk about the good times, Ebony, because I've got 2009 written down here, which we'll get into in a second. But certainly for me, you learn from those mistakes. You understand the why. You get people on board with the why, and the people that can't get on board with the why maybe aren't part of the journey ahead, and that can be a difficult thing. We've talked about that in this podcast, the difficult conversations that need to be had sometimes. But no, I completely kind of connect with what you're saying. So like, 2009, or you're going to jump in, Will?
No, I was just, I think it's so interesting to listen to you, Ebony, about that, because I think there's somewhat difference between maybe your first experience as a captain for your club, and then obviously going away on your first tour, the national team is different, because sometimes the why is already written, because, you know, everyone is there who's selected, who's on the same journey, wants to represent and fly the flag, right? But I think sometimes it's when people try to relate it to their day-to-day environment, where you might not necessarily have a shared purpose or like a higher goal, then I think there's a real skill in learning to understand the people that you work with, because often my motivation or your motivation and reasons aren't aligned if you were to actually break them down. But if you are trying to lead a group or captain a group, then you somewhat have to understand what people want and how you can actually bring them to kind of face in the same direction and understand that, okay, together we're going to achieve this, which is going to help you achieve what you actually want. And I think the best captains and people know how to kind of, I don't want to say manipulate, because that's not the right word, but to understand how to, kind of maneuver people in the right way. But that comes with, like you said, learning your group. And if you stand in front of a group for the first time, I've been there before as well, when you don't hit them with the right energy, or maybe do too much or too little. And then all of a sudden you feel very alone, and everyone's looking at you, and you think that wasn't necessarily what everyone needed at this moment, which is a real skill, but you have to learn it. It's not something that I think anyone has naturally. You might have some kind of aura and you know, people have some kind of gravity which they can pull people with, but I think the best people that you see, and someone who's gone as far as you have, and I think really embodied that, I most likely had to learn it along the way, which is sometimes the thing that people forget. And I think for anyone who's listening to this, you don't just get born a certain way. You have to learn. It's a people skill, it's a soft skill, right?
Yeah, and I think that one thing you said as well, which I don't think people talk enough about, is the lonely side sometimes as a leader, because you have to step away sometimes from the group to process, think through, you know, how does everyone operate? And that space, I have to learn sometimes to step back from the group, not to dissociate, just to have perspective on, making sure that, are we going in the right, ask yourself the difficult questions sometimes. And that requires sometimes a bit of a lonely path of, I think, not fully just defaulting to always, this has been my experience, just being part of the group anymore. It's, okay, you're part of the group and yes, you're sharing the same values, but someone's going to be accountable sometimes at the end. If in a sports scenario, the captain's going to get it sometimes, in our sport, definitely he's the first person. In a board scenario or ACE, for example, if we fail on our mission, I'm getting it straight away. If a safeguarding issue pops up, and you're at the front as the chair, you're having it. So that lonely part where you have to sort of just separate a bit isn't natural, because I love feeling sort of always part of everybody. But you need that reflective space and making sure that you're doing the best you can for the group and understanding the dynamics to the best you can.
I've always been fascinated by captains in cricket, because very differently to rugby and football, cricket captains lead their team, but they also have probably more responsibility and more... Sorry.
That's a fine.
Sorry. It was for my friend. Sorry. So cricket captains have more of a responsibility than a rugby captain or a football captain, because cricket captains, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're involved in team selection, and that adds a completely different dynamic to team scenarios, team situations, because probably in every team that I've ever been a part of, there's always some kind of disgruntled feeling towards the coach who picks the team. From a certain member, certain group, there's always maybe one or two people in their feelings or feeling a type of way. But when that's a player who's also involved in the selection of the team, that in my head, that holds a completely different dynamic. So maybe if you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think cricket captaincy is amazing at the peak and awful when you get it wrong, because not only do you get involved in the sort of selection, like every sort of on-field decision you choose at what moment, imagine you're in a test match and you get a hunch to bring on a particular bowler. It might just be a hunch. You've got no stats to back it up, or the analyst has given you all the information. But at that moment, you have to just say, I'm going to back myself and my gut feeling to make this decision. And if it works, you're a genius. Everyone's hyping it up. If it doesn't work, you've got players saying, why did I not get brought on at this moment? You're moving the chess pieces within a match. Whereas, say, football, once you're all on doing your job. But cricket, the captain is always moving around. What player does he want or she want in a fielding position? What bowler, batter? There's so much control, I would say. And therefore, that's why you definitely need to have your teams buy in, because you need to make sure that everyone's clear on roles. You need to understand who's going to manage. If you just have this gut feeling, who's going to be able to handle that pressure. And some players are good when they know their role, but the minute it goes slightly off script, they're not ready to respond. And then all of a sudden you're in a war in the changing room, and I've been in changing rooms where you've had like really tough conversations, I'm sure, like we all have. And when you're the captain and you've made a wrong call, it's not a good feeling, and but equally it feels amazing when you get it right. And there is so much subjectivity in cricket, and it makes it beautiful at times, and it also makes it difficult to justify. You can't always justify. You've got two players who almost demonstrate the exact same stats or similar stats, or you look at their conditions and one player is better, but something is just telling you, maybe how you saw them in the change room or how they warmed up in training, that they're not the person to go in that moment. So yeah, I think it's a really good skill, because I feel like cricket is a lot like life in a lot of ways. I feel like it. You're a team player, but everyone's also exposed so much as an individual. A batter could score 100, but your team loses. And so that batter is heralded and the rest of the team scolded, or vice versa. So I think that's the one good thing about cricket. It always taught you that you've got to be functional as a team, but you've also got to make sure you're doing your job, because you get highlighted quite quickly, whether you're stepping up or not. So that pressure's high.
No, I was going to have one question, because even like you said, when it's things are going well, I presume there's still going to be some unhappy faces in the change room, because, you know, you might have selected Maro and Leon, but I would have thought if I would have played today, I could have done that job, or maybe been part of that. So how do you deal with that when you come in the change room? Do you feel like you can really dive into those celebrations, or are you looking around and seeing, okay, what does she think, or what does she think?
Yeah, I try my best. Like, I prefer early conversations because I had a lot of experience, actually, especially in my time coming through the international side, where I was in and out of the squad. But when you had a healthy conversation ahead of time with coach or captain, and they let you know their reasonings, whether you liked it or not, if you respected them, you did, and then you're still good around the team. But the minute you feel hard done by, you're bringing bad energy. And so for me, I preferred, you know, some teams announce, England do it, actually, the England men do it a lot. They announce the team ahead of time. It's because they're clearing up all the conversations, getting clarity. If a player needs to sleep overnight on how they feel, get it out your system and focus as a unit for tomorrow. And so I've always preferred that approach. Have time with players or the management, get the awkwardness out as early as possible, and then you've got time to refocus. But afterwards as well, you know, sometimes, you know, it's hard to justify, you know, especially when you've got the best thing about a team that's performing, and I'm sure you guys feel that, is there's so much competition for places and not just one person doing good. You could have one role and there's like 4 or 5 men or women that could step into it. And so your justifications become harder and harder. And I don't know if you guys have felt that, like, the best teams, when you're performing, it becomes harder to make some of those decisions because so many people have upped their game and so many people are ready to perform.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess I'm not a coach, but as a coach and I guess as a captain in cricket, even though it's difficult, they're the scenarios in which you probably want to have. If you only have like 5 or 6 or so players performing well, then I guess it's not really the team that you want to be a part of. But my question is why? Because in football, in rugby, the captain or the group of players on the pitch, if tactics needs to be changed, they can do that. If they need to change the type of way they need to play, they have the prerogative to do that. Whereas the captain in cricket is almost like a coach. So why is it like that I think cricket is the only sport where the captain has that much responsibility that he can literally, you know, hook somebody off. You know, you're not doing well. Off you go. Like, no other sport does that. So why is cricket like that?
I think the coaches hide behind that as well, actually.
Yeah. I mean, you do get the, hey, look, I selected the team and over to the captain on the field. I think like cricket is an interesting game because I feel like, sorry, I'm just saying, can you see that? Is that going to annoy anyone or is that all right? Can you see that in the back? That's fine. Sorry, let me, sorry. Sorry. So cricket, and the fact that a captain has so much control is quite odd in this day and age. But cricket is, I mean, if you look at Test cricket and the traditionalism, and it came from Empire, you know, we're still dressed in whites. It's played over 5 days in a very sort of traditional game that is rooted in tradition, you know. And I think there's pros and cons to it, you know. I think in this modern day, you want as much collaboration as possible. And so you find that good captains actually are not just calling the shots. As it may appear on the pitch, you'll see in the men's game a Joe Root defaults, you know, will touch base with Ben Stokes, or in the women's game, Heather Knight and Nat Civil will have a conversation. I always had players that I would default to as well. And so I think the better captains don't abuse their power because that only lasts so long. And I think the system in cricket, yes, it allows you to sort of stand up and lead, but it also, you can find yourself down a bad path if you take too much control, not enough collaboration. So it's an interesting rule. I don't know why cricket continues to this day, but it does. I think in the short formats of the game, you know, the quick 100, T20, you find now there's so much more movement and the plans are a little bit more sort of clinical, players are in and out, and it's kind of almost predetermined, not predetermined, but there's a little bit more structure to it. Whereas I think Test cricket, which goes on for days and days and days, the captain is calling the shots, and you see sometimes bad mistakes and you get called out and you have to suck it up, really.
I think it's really interesting that we're kind of focusing on where some of the things have gone wrong. I think a psychologist would look at this podcast and go, this is interesting. They're jumping straight to the things. I had a conversation with Gareth Southgate when he was England manager. And I'd done a session with him, which was 40 minutes in front of an audience of young people from the BComs group that I founded. And at the end, I referenced something that he had said about a jacket I was wearing, where he goes, "Oh, that's an interesting jacket." And he said that at the beginning of the conversation. I used that as part of my closing. And he said, "That is really interesting. We've had 40 minutes. We've talked about all sorts of things, really positive conversations. But you, in your summary, have prioritized the one thing you deemed as being potentially negative." And you know what? It kind of blew my mind a little bit. I was like, well, it's the interesting thing, right? It's like the thing that got everyone laughing because he'd taken the mickey out of a jacket I was wearing or whatever it was at the time. But it is interesting that we jump to the things that kind of essentially, I guess, that we've learned from. So I'm going to flip that on its head now, Ebony, because I've got to get this in, right? 2009, right? Big year for you. Winning both the ICC Women's Cricket World Cup and the Women's World 2020. For athletes, those experiences become defining moments. So what did that teach you? What did that period teach you about leadership within seriously high-performing team?
Yeah, I think the number one thing I've always realized is like achieving your goals takes so much longer than you think. And so the positive side of that is like stick to your vision and like really have belief in what you're trying to achieve. And I feel like that whole environment, the belief within the team, the management, the players, the families around, everything kind of, it felt like inevitable actually that we were going to go and be successful, despite the fact that when I joined the team 4 years prior, we weren't in a good place. And so I think the number one thing is like when you're in a position where, you want to do something meaningful or you really have to find that belief, and I feel like we believed in each other. We believed it was possible. It was like it's mostly one of the most sort of tribal experiences I felt actually, the build up, the sort of 18 months towards it. It was like we almost like just indoctrinated ourselves that we will win. Like we have that ability with this in us. And I think that what I learned in that environment, because I wasn't leading as such in that team, I was just one of the players in the environment. But that feeling of belief and knowing you can achieve a goal that I remember writing up on my board as a kid, I want to achieve. I was good friends like Isha Guha, he's in the media, and all those guys. We were believing in each other so much. That sort of has allowed me when I go into other environments, when we set up ACE and people said the black community are not interested in cricket, that belief, I was able to sort of tap into that sort of deep ability to kind of look beyond the obvious and think, of course, we can achieve something that is a little bit out of the ordinary. It is possible. And so I think that experience it kind of changed me internally. It's like you have this lifelong vision. You write it down as a 12-year-old, 14-year-old. You talk to everyone in your family reorganizes their life to help you fulfill your dream. And then to be able to achieve it amongst a group of an amazing group, and also not just do it. We went on to win 3, which made us one of the most successful women's cricket teams in that period of all history. So you knew you were at something special. It changed my mindset on what is possible and how you install belief in individuals and environments. And so whenever I go into new places now, I remember when I first walked into women's cricket, a director of women's cricket role at Surrey, where there hadn't been any professionalism of the women's game at that point. And, the club had sort of said, we can see there's a movement, gave me an opportunity to set a role. And a lot of people were kind of like, women's cricket, what is it? Like, it's not professional. It's not going to be professional. And now you're seeing, Nat Sciver-Brunt is the second most highly paid female athlete in the UK, 200K, 300K in IPL for 6 weeks work. The number has just gone from 0 to a lot. And so I think that belief piece when you go into leadership, you kind of sometimes have to believe the impossible and then use that to bring other people and get them to believe it as well. So, I think that's a positive. Is that a positive, Leon? We've shifted from negative to.
Well, it's a huge positive, and when you talk about the shift that we've seen just recently in like when this goes out, it'll be within the last month. The huge amounts of money that are being paid now in women's cricket, like it's a seismic change, right? And look, Ebony, we could talk about your playing career for the next hour of this podcast, right? So this is like the worst thing that I have to host, to shift things into different areas so quickly, because anyone listening might think I'm being a bit disrespectful, but I've got to keep this moving. But clearly there's a lot more we could talk about. But before we move on to broadcasting, because I want to jump into that, because I think, like, you know, a lot of our listeners will know you as a broadcaster, because you're exceptional and at the top of your game, which is just amazing. But before I do, like, I have to ask you this question, and it's a very predictable question from me. But you were the first black woman to play for England. What was that like? And this might not be a short answer to this question, but I'm just really interested, because I used to play cricket myself, right? And like, we talk about underrepresentation in sport, etc. And from all the sports that I participated in at an amateur level, as everyone who listens to this podcast knows, cricket was one of the hardest. So I got to admit, I used to love cricket, but I was really underrepresented. It was really difficult. We're going to talk about Ace a little bit later on in the podcast, so we can get deeper into it. But for you, as an achievement and as a journey, I'm just really interested in terms of black woman steps into this space. Talk to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've spoken a decent amount about it, but I definitely, when I was told, I remember our media manager came to me. We were in Chennai in India, and she said, "Yeah, I think we've just been checking the records. We think you're the first black woman to play cricket for England." And my first thought was dread. I was like, "Oh my God!" And that sounds like an awful thing to say, but it was like a few things. I was thinking, how in this, you know, we're in the 2000s. How is it possible that there hasn't been? So I felt really uncomfortable. Then I was like, well, I already stand out and have had challenges standing out, and you kind of do all your work just to try and be in the team and not be noticed. And so the last thing you want is any sort of media or headline saying, here comes the first black woman to play for cricket for England. So I have to be honest, my first thought was like, one, why is this still happening? Like, why are there not more? I wasn't happy about that. And then the second is I just wanted to play and didn't really want the attention. So I think my initial response wasn't positive. What I would say, though, later, and it happens, I suppose, for a lot of players, who you kind of go from just trying to make it in the team to you start thinking about your legacy and life and things like that. And it was only when it dawned on me that I could use it as a meaningful way to inspire others. And there was like a shift for me. It was a real shifting moment. And there was different people who have inspired me around that. Michael Holding, who many of you may know, but incredible West Indian cricketer. I remember having some really good conversations as well, especially around Black Lives Matter movements and stuff like that. Having talks with people in the community and realizing you didn't realize you would inspire them to stay in the game and to keep working. So that there became a flip where I felt really uncomfortable about it to you know what, let's maximize this opportunity and try and inspire as many. And, you know, I remember like the person I used to look to was Denise Lewis, because there weren't black females in my, in you know, English cricket. So Denise Lewis was my inspiration. There's a lady called Mel Jones, who's another amazing broadcaster from Australia. And so I took inspiration from them growing up. And so when I realized that same feeling that they gave me, it was happening for others. That was the kind of turning point of saying, don't fight this, actually maximize it and make the best.
It feels like a good transition to talking about Ace, actually. We are going to come to your broadcasting shortly, but Ace, the African Caribbean engagement program that you came up with, which is doing some incredible things. I don't know if you could give us just like an understanding. What is Ace? You've referenced it a few times. We've talked about it very briefly at the top of the show, but I know you're incredibly proud of the creation of Ace. But tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so ACE was set up because in cricket, I think rugby has maybe some stats along the similar line, but we had in professional players a decline of 75%. So it was declining in professional players. The grassroots was less than 1%. And I remember watching Jofra Archer at Lords charging into bowl at Steve Smith, and I remember just thinking, this is our moment. He was playing in the men's team, Sophia Dunkley in the women's team. And I was like, we just need more, we just need more. And the key of having someone at the top of the game is so important for the visibility. So basically, long and short, we set up like a talent ID program. Initially, it started just in partnership with Surrey County Cricket Club in South London. And then Sport England, when they started seeing the results that we were finding young people and getting them through into professional cricket, or the pathway, gave us some money and basically said expand to 3 cities, and then we ended up moving to 6. So yeah, ACE operates in 6 cities: London, Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, and Sheffield. I think I might have gone around the houses there. Manchester, but either way, we're in 6 different cities, and in each city we basically have schools program that leads into community, that leads into an academy, and then the academy gets into professional cricket. So we just had 3 young people last year getting contracts, which is amazing. Moving into professional cricket, we've had 50,000 kids come through the program. So yeah, it's going well, and we're reconnecting with the community. And the trajectory, we'll see so many more young people, hopefully, in that professional pipeline from the Black community.
The Caribbeans have a long-standing history with cricket. You may or may not know this, but I'm of Nigerian descent, and I think I can quite confidently say that cricket is not something that is played heavily, at least in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, bar a couple of countries, of course. So, to what success are you able to convince the Nigerian uncles and aunties to let their kids play cricket?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, because we look at all our data and stuff like that. And the good news for us, actually, because when we first started ACE, we were leveraging off the old Caribbean diaspora, and we thought that was going to be the selling point. But interestingly, the young kids who are 7, 8, 9, they didn't know anything about cricket, and they were not even interested in cricket at all. And so we found that just going into schools and just someone putting a bat and ball in some kids' hands, and just by engaging, the kids weren't thinking about, they didn't care about a cricketer that was from the 70s or the 80s. They didn't know enough about cricket to care. So we actually got lucky that in some ways there was such a disconnect in terms of the communities. Yes, there were still hubs, there's Caribbean cricket clubs, but the actual kids that we're getting to the first time they're playing cricket had no connection. So we're getting into communities and seeing kids from all sorts of backgrounds, including African diaspora. There's some really good, interesting mixes. South Asian young people. We got white working class coming through the program. So in some ways, I'm glad, because I thought we were going to be hinging our success on the past, oh my gosh, the Caribbean community has died down. But luckily, what it told us is that care, attention, inspiring young people face to face. So the good news for you is we have high numbers of young people from African heritage coming through as well. So, and what we find actually with a lot of our programs, and I would say that's a success of a measurable success, is, say, for example, you take Around the Oval. It has a high Black Caribbean, but it also has high Portuguese, etc., white working class. If we don't see those stats represented in our program as they progress, it means we haven't done a good job. So we're always checking to make sure, are we inspiring enough people within this community to come through to our sessions? And even though we target highly densely populated Black areas, we need to make sure that we are doing our job to bring everyone through. So good news for you. If we were coming into your school when you were younger, you'd be feeling cricket. You may have even pivoted cricket instead of rugby. You never know.
Wow,
I would have loved that.
I have, I did have played a little bit of
Oh,
cricket in my time.
Right.
And if you saw me play cricket, you would be happy that I'm not playing cricket.
Will, are you better bowler?
You know what? I So I grew up in the Netherlands and I went to boarding school in the UK. So for me in Holland, cricket wasn't even a thing that we really spoke about. So it was like my first in the summer term introduction to cricket. That was like the time that we played. And actually I loved it, but like maybe some of the kids that you would have met or through the program, it was all new to me. And it was similar in the sense that I wasn't necessarily watching on TV or inspired by something. So yeah, I tried a bit of everything. I wouldn't say I was great either, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I think the one thing that was a little bit more difficult is that obviously we only had that space at my school that was probably big enough to actually play. And I don't know if that's something that you see, maybe some of the areas that you target or even like equipment. It just sometimes was easier when you had a small space, you know, just throw a ball in the middle and everyone knows how to play football and wants to play that. Whereas, yeah, I think cricket in England, but then if you look at, you know, some of the other countries where they'll play all over the streets as well, maybe it's just not as known. But I think, I don't know if there's any like boundaries like to enter the sport, or is that something that you guys help with ACE as well?
Yeah, definitely. So the good thing from a lot of the team that works on ACE, my entry into cricket was street cricket. So I played street cricket in Stockwell Park School for 2 years. Like literally we're on concrete with not much equipment.
Okay.
But we had a coach, actually, a guy who's from the Caribbean, who used to just mobilise the local community. And we used to just play, very informal. And all the main coaches, Chevy, who runs the program, have all worked on street cricket programs. So what we've learned is, how do you transition when you have limited resources? How do you find talent? And interestingly, I think street cricket is a great way for talent, because you're restricted. You have to pick up new skills of how you time the ball, move the ball, maneuver the ball. You get a lot of kids with really skiddy arms because they bowl with tennis balls that skid off the surface. So I like constraints, actually. I think it's a positive. And you see that across, you know, a lot of the subcontinent, India, Pakistan. You see players who've come through that. So the frustration, I think, in England is we don't put enough emphasis on seeing street cricket sometimes as a standalone form of cricket enough. And there are programs that are helping that grow. But we use street cricket because in a lot of the areas we go to, you've got limited resources, etc. But it's fun, it's quick, it's a great way to engage. So if I would have met you guys back in the day, don't worry, I'd have got you all in the park. We'd have been playing some street cricket, and I'd have swung you the other way.
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm kind of trying to get a vision of Maro and Will playing cricket now. I've got kind of Maro's coming in at like number 4. He's the swashbuckling. He's looking to just like launch it. And I think I've got Will coming in as kind of like my medium pace bowler who just kind of gets it on the spot every time. Just like I can trust him to pitch it in the right place. Obviously, I'll be 12th man, but
Leon, you're into your cricket though, so you must be scoring some runs in this side.
Well, I wish we had Ace. Like that's all I'm going to say, because it would have helped my cricket progression massively, because I used to open the bowling, open the batting, and then be keeping wicket, because my school, my dad had to tell me to go to the PE teacher to say, will you start a cricket team, right? Because he's a cricket obsessive, and he was like, what, your school hasn't got a cricket team? This is crazy. You're like, you know, just go and ask. And I did ask, and I'll tell you what happened. A lot of the South Asian kids who weren't engaged with sport really at the time, certainly not playing for the school at like football or running for athletics, they all turned up with these massive CAA bats. Now, Ebs will know what I mean by that, right?
I know what you
These
mean.
are bats from Pakistan, which are so thick.
They're thick, they're proper.
Heavy.
The bottom heavy as well.
Gosh, bottom heavy. But these were street cricket guys, and we got them out in the middle, and they were slapping this ball around with these huge bats. It was amazing. And yeah, we had a lot of fun, but we went and played a lot of the private schools, and those guys were just very, very good at cricket. So it got a little bit embarrassing at times, but we all had a lot of fun. And yeah, I've got my own thoughts on cricket and where we need to get to with it and stuff. And I love the fact that Ace is there, because maybe I would have been sat on this podcast as like a Middlesex legend.
I was going to say a different intro.
would have been a different intro, you know, if I'd had Ace. I'm very sure of that. But here we are. Go on, Maro. Go on.
So rugby and cricket are often seen in similar lights um, with regards to class, I guess, with regards to access to the sport. And I guess traditionally speaking, it's been people of a certain background who have typically played cricket, typically played rugby. Football is probably more of a easily accessible game due to the nature of football. To what extent do you still think class plays a role within the cricket environment, and to what extent does that differ between the men's and women's game?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think it's massive. And the good news is the sport has recognised a lot and has put a lot into try and reduce costs in pathways and open up access. But one thing that stood out to me, especially when we were looking at ACE, because we were trying to plot not only how do we find talent, but we've got to get this talent to the level that it's able to compete. And the one thing that private school kids have more is just contact time. You know, we were talking to some kids who've got 20 hours of contact time in a week, one-to-one coaches, then fielding coach, all at private school. And it's nothing to do. I would do exactly what the parents did themselves, but our kids just didn't have the contact time. And I remember for me, we didn't grow up with a huge amount of money, but I got a few things. One, my poor mum, she bless my mum, Mother's Day yesterday or recently, and my mum used to get up at 5 a.m. because we didn't have like the money for bowling machines and stuff. She would be throwing balls, like tennis balls. We'd throw like thousands of balls. My mum's ambidextrous as well, so she was giving me like left arm, right arm, all of that. But not having money, you know, single parent family, you know, it was pretty tough growing up. We had to put in a sheer volume of work just to get some of the setup, and then later on I got scholarships, and then once the scholarships flowed, it was pretty easy. You're in the system. So I think for us, it's there's one thing is getting the opportunity, which is improving. So I think cricket has got now a number of charities, Chance to Shine, Lord's Taverners. There's so many charities. ACE, they're all working, so the opportunities are increasing. Then once you get into the system, the cost barriers are starting to come down. They're not finished, but they're starting to come down. And then I think that contact time. And so we're seeing more academies pop up for different communities just to try and give that extra contact time. So I don't think we've cracked that. You know, we still have a lot of kids that if they get the opportunity to get a private school scholarship, we're like, if you want to go and your families want you to go and do it, because it will accelerate that opportunity. But for me, it's how, if a kid is wanting to make it, there is now more opportunities. The barriers and costs are coming down, and then I think it's cracking that contact time, that high quality coaching that can help kids accelerate. And in football, it's everywhere. There's so many opportunities to develop. In cricket, it's limited. You know, it's a few districts, few counties. So I think increasing more of those opportunities is where we're going to really have that step change.
Do you think there's a issue or problem with how, I guess, the clubs or academies view kids from different backgrounds? Do you think there's a inherent bias in that?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of research, and two, I've got like even personal experience from my journey or people I've worked with. I think, you know, some of the things I noticed as a proper inner school South London kid. I remember rocking up to my first session with purple t-shirt, like red t-shirt, purple shorts, and I was wearing bare feet. I just kicked my trainers off, and everyone else has stood in whites. And I was considered to have an attitude problem, but I was just this kid, you know, running around South London bricks, and there was just a lack of maybe cultural awareness about my community, how we expressed ourselves, etc. That created a barrier at times, and I see that sometimes for young people from different backgrounds, religious, different, you know, they're going through Ramadan and things like that, and they're going to operate differently. And what clubs are now starting to do, which I've seen a shift in cricket from the top down, is starting to realise we need to provide really inclusive environments, and that requires us to understand. We talked about this earlier, understanding people and understanding our communities. So there's been a shift to understanding, but I don't think we're going to knock out biases overnight. You know, we all have them. I have them. You know, we naturally default to what resonates with our own image. But I think what we're seeing now in selection, there's more more ways in which selection are trying to reduce biases within selection. Clubs are becoming, so the awareness piece is there. And I think now we're just starting to see the start of execution. So it's a long game, you know. I think that area of breaking down biases and understanding people in different communities, that's a long piece of work. I don't think we'll see it overnight, but I am seeing the shift and the awareness starting to happen. And so those are the positives that we can take away.
Ebony, I love listening to you because it makes me feel like super, super happy that you are on the board of the England and Wales Cricket Board. That's such an important role you have. And the way you're speaking, the way you're talking about different communities, all communities, is just vital. So I'd like to dive into that now in terms of stepping into the governance side of the game, because, you know, I look at Will and Maro, I can see that kind of pathway potentially for them in the future. This is like big brother kind of thing, although I don't really feel like I don't really feel like a big brother with these guys, man. They're just kind of on the next level. However, like you've made that transition from elite athlete into the boardroom. Tell us a bit about that, and you know, the challenges, the opportunities, the experience. Do they listen to you?
Yeah, good question. I hope so. I mean, I hope so. I when I want to make a point, I bang on. When I don't want to make a point, or it's not my area, I just keep quiet. But my journey's kind of been, I keep saying I was a reluctant earlier leader, but I was fortunate because my club was Surrey, and I started in a role around women's cricket, director of women's cricket, trying to professionalise the game and bring the club on, looking a bit of player performance, commercial stuff, marketing, the whole sort of package. And I remember the chair of the club at the time had asked me to write this report about what I want done for the women's game, the growth of it in the county. And I didn't even want to write it because I didn't want to present it at the board. I didn't want, I don't know, it felt a bit exposing of your ideas. Anyway, I finally wrote this report, and the report goes to the board. At this stage, I'm not on it, but I got a call from the chief exec saying the board have been really impressed with your paper, how you want to approach targeting. And they felt that to implement it, they were like, well, who else is going to implement this plan that you've just come up with but you? So you kind of put your head above the parapet saying, I think we should do X, 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 Y, Z. And then eventually, so I came onto the board as an executive board member. So as executive and non-executive, I found different challenges. So as the executive board member, it was exciting at one hand, but remember, at that stage, you're in a room where you're one of the only females, only person from colour, So I think, first of all, speaking up, I would say it took me 2 years before I really confidently spoke. I would say bits, or if there's a report to be made or something, but I would never interrupt or sort of call out or make some points. But I think over time, like anything, you just start to build your confidence. I got some good advice from other board members who I trusted, or I could see how they operate. And you realize actually the boardroom is where the decisions are made, it's where the money flow is decided. It's where the vision of whether it's the club or the governance is made. And it's kind of like the place that I wouldn't say as a kid, I would have said, I really want to be on a board. But I think what I've realized as I've got older is if you want influence, it's the place to be. It's an opportunity to be in the rooms where the decisions are made. I found executive board membership easier because I had some influence because I was an executive of the club. Now I'm a non-exec member. You have to be really clear that you don't work. You're not an employee. You're a non-exec. So you then have to step back and be more strategic. Your goal is to make sure things are staying on track in the right direction, but you don't have the day-to-day conversations and you're not in the weeds. So you have to have that sort of step removed. So I found that transition quite interesting. I like being in the mix. I like, being around the team. I like stuff like that happening. And actually boards are very different. You're there once every 6 weeks or 2 months in a long meeting, evaluating everything. You also have to weigh up the risks. So, in my earlier career, I could make a lot of risks in certain environments. Actually, you've got to, you could take a lot of risks, As you move up, you've got to really think through all your stakeholders, all the different parts and, the international impacts, the impacts on grassroots. There's so many things to consider. So it's much more of a step removed. But what I suppose the benefit is that you get to have a say in that room. And, you know, for me, at the board levels has been quite clear, is inclusion is at my heart. As women, diversity, disability. I've worked a lot in disability sports, seeing the groups that don't get as much airtime be at the forefront. And so being on the board at ECB was involved around the tier 1 and tier 2, which is the first full professionalism of the women's game, seeing the 100 deal coming through, seeing gender pay, seeing investment into diversity and into the disability, get all those sort of things. To be in that room and being able to help shape the conversations has meant a lot. So it takes skills. Again, it's not natural. I'm sure we've all been through these worlds where it's not natural, but you just get stuck in and you learn what you need to do to be able to speak up and make your part. So yeah, I now say what as you can tell, I've just been banging on for however long to you guys.
Not at all.
When I need to speak, I do. But I don't know, how do you guys find speaking up and leading and that process? I mean, Leon, you're very vocal, and you've always been, especially BComs, all the world, you've always been very visual, but I don't know if that was natural for you to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely not. It wasn't natural at all. And, I've been a board observer on the PGMO, the referees professional group in football, and, learned a lot of lessons in that space. Did that for 2 years, and actually, just felt at times a little bit overwhelmed in terms of that first comment you made about when you contribute and when actually you don't contribute. So actually, I would love it if people listening to this, like, I felt like I had to contribute on agenda item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because but sometimes you have to realize, okay, I'm not an expert in this, so let me just actually listen, understand, ensure that you've read all your board papers, so you're not ever going in there and just kind of trying to, just pick it up with people who know these things deep on different things. So I definitely made mistakes, but also I learned to challenge, and I learned how to challenge. Because, if you want to influence people around things that an organization should be doing, probably banging the table and saying you need to do this or else you're rubbish is probably not the best way to bring people on the journey with you, right? Sometimes you need to bang the table and say, I disagree with this and this is why. So it's kind of like understanding, that kind of ebb and flow within that environment, I think. And also, I think particularly I felt this as, a Black person of color, that when I was in that space, I had to solve all of the problems for Black people in meeting one. And you've got your community kind of like egging you on, go on, get in there, you're kind of like feeling it. And actually, it takes time to change things. And particularly when you're going into spaces where people are not used to dealing with maybe younger people from different backgrounds, different experiences. And there can be an impatience that actually can mean that you make mistakes and actually can put yourself back and put the community back in many ways. So I had so many learnings from my experiences, not just PGMOL, because it was ultimately a positive experience, but from the Sports Journalists Association, where I'm the vice chair, that I'm a number of years into that, and my contributions are very, very different to when I first stepped around the table, because there's a journey, there's an understanding to it. And like, do you want to win or do you want to score points? That's kind of my mentality now. Like scoring points, gotcha moments, ain't going to get the stuff done that actually changes things.
It's true.
But it might feel good at that point in time. You might feel like, put one on that person who's like really like some kind of dinosaur. However, does it get the stuff done ultimately, or do they just dig in deeper? And actually, it takes you another 2, 3, 4 years to actually get the thing done. So no, that's been my experience. So I've got so many learnings, and this is why I was really like eager to do this podcast with Will and Maro, because like where do we hear and learn these things, and where are these kind of lessons accessible? I'm not completely sure there are platforms that talk about your first board meeting as someone who's never had one before. And I might be saying something that's completely wrong for another kind of character, but I do feel like by sharing this experience, by listening importantly to your experience and learning from that, we're helping those people, regardless of your age or background, but we're helping people going into those spaces, I believe. So, yeah.
So we see Will and Maro are going to be dominating all the boards in the next decade, right?
Well, inshallah.
There's definitely a journey there for both of them, I think and hope. And if it's not them and it's someone who's listening to this, then fantastic as well. But I don't know. Does anyone? No one's going to commit on any kind of like future of boardroom roles. Will Maro, you've been very quiet. This is not like you both.
I'm just listening. It's the same thing. Like it's so much to take in and learn, because these are things that I probably aspire to do, and we talk about it in different moments. But yeah, how do you prepare for that first board meeting? So as of late, I've had a small promotion within one of the companies which I'm an investor of, called Sakito. Is a football boot brand. Where now I will be a board observer for the next 6 months, and hopefully then I'll get, if that goes well, then I'll be part of the board and a non-exec director, which I had to Google because I was like, what's a NED? My father-in-law was, he always talks to me about the different positions he has. And all of a sudden I find that at the bottom of my email reply. So it's been really interesting, because same way I have so many ideas and I try to filter myself some moments, because I can talk to you about a football boot or maybe an idea or where the world is going, how it's on your feet and all that kind of stuff. And I think they appreciate that info and of course my vision on things. But if we really talk about all the stats, and we talk about the marketing and all the other parts of a business, which I'm not necessarily an expert of, there's something to be said about knowing when to speak up and how you can actually have a meaningful input, instead of just piling on all my ideas and then wasting people's time where they have to explain to me, well, this is how it works on this and this and this and this. So it's been a great experience, because I feel like they are guiding me with that, but definitely an experience that I hope to transfer into other things outside of this vested interest. But it's really interesting to hear, because I think, like you said, if you want to make long-term impact and even just want to make change, which I think Maro and myself probably have a lot of ideas, how do you actually implement that and really do something meaningful? So that's why we've been so quiet from my side. But Maro is probably going to tell you now that he's already executive board director at many different places. But we'll learn about that now.
Well, not quite yet. But I do think this is, and I think this is why it's so important that Leon, yourself, Ebony, yourself, and now that we've heard as a exclusive on Power and Purpose that Will is now a board member. But in all seriousness, I think it's very important that we hear about these things and see these things, because we often see people of color on the pitch. I think we've become normal. That's become normalized, seeing and almost what's expected. But when it becomes in terms of decision making, in the administrative sort of positions or the business sort of positions or the executive sort of positions, that's still the area within sport that we need to see more and more of. And I think if we talk about it more, if we see it more, I think it becomes more of a pathway that young players of color can aspire to do. And I wouldn't mind per se if we have young. I might even prefer it if we have young people, men and women, who actually aspire, I want to be on the board of the FA, as opposed to I actually want to play football. Like, I think that would be a super cool aspiration to have. And it's because of trailblazers like yourself, Ebony and Leon, and now Will, we will get closer and closer to that.
Love that. I can't let Ebony go without talking about broadcasting, because Like Ebony, you're like the Michael Richards of cricket. Like literally, I'm like,
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, he's got a good laugh. I don't know about that.
Well, in terms of the proliferation, because you're exceptional at what you do. I'm like, there's Sky Sports, there's TNT, there's BBC, there's Ebony. Like, we love it. We love it. We love it. We love it. But you are an exceptional broadcaster, and it just feels weird saying that because everyone knows it. Like we could hear in this podcast just the way you're talking and sharing. But you know that is a transition from being athlete to behind the microphone. And also, I just wanted to ask you about because I'm not sure some of the guys realize this, how much influence there is in terms of like the narrative around the game as a broadcaster. How did you find that transition? And do you think broadcasters realize their power? Because you can literally shape what a conversation is around whatever has happened in that said game.
Yeah. I'll give you. So the first bit I would say, I mean, every journey has a bit of luck or timing or both in it. So I was gutted that I retired from women's cricket. One injury, always had a dodgy back, and I was over it. The other thing was we weren't getting paid really. We were hardly making any money at the time. The girls are now I always remind them now they got the cars, they got the sunnies. I missed out on the payday. So I remember like retiring thinking, God, I'm not sure what I was going to do. I did chemistry at uni, so I was maybe going to go back to science. And I remember just being stood on Streatham Common train station, and I got this call from this guy. Sounded really posh. He was like, hello. And he was like, my name is Adam Mountford. He's like BBC boss. He doesn't mind me saying, you know, Mountie. He's like, hello, Ebony. And I was like, you know, when you go from oi, hello, yeah, who's that?
Telephone voice.
Telephone call. And I remember he just said someone has told him that I wanted to be a broadcaster. I'd never told anyone that I did, but whatever it was, bit of luck. Someone had said my name. I just retired, had no money. Let's go, you know? And I think it was luck. I wasn't preparing to be a broadcaster. I wasn't doing any training. It was just pure luck. But then I think the one thing that I did do, which is a sport thing, is once I got that opportunity, because we started on women's tournament, it was England women playing India, but I definitely grabbed the opportunity. So, you know, when you see it there, you kind of go all in, try and learn everything you can. Started studying other broadcasters and seeing how they operate as well. And I think there's two things with broadcasting. What I realized over time, actually, is there's no point being too polished. You know, you can have too many notes, too much data, and you don't connect with the audience. So it's all, you got to be yourself, but also you got to be prepared, because as a woman, like when we started those days, it was Twitter. If you got one fact wrong, your phone is getting absolutely hammered, you know, and you're turning your phone off. So it forced you to be very prepared on your notes and your data and understanding. But also over time, as I relaxed, I became more myself. And so I think the good thing now is like I'll say some random like South London expressions that are not very, you know, you're on a test match where everyone's sounding very polished and proper, and you're like, mate, that shot was a different gravy, and you're like, that's not very test match, you know, but you're being yourself. So yeah, that's the thing. The other thing about the learning about your influence as a broadcaster, I learned the hard way a few times by realizing what you say can become a headline and then it can affect players. I was during the Ashes, I was working with Alastair Cook, and during his playing, he had this period. So he's a great England batter, and he had this period where he wasn't scoring any runs, and everyone was like, "Is his captaincy over?" And maybe it was a bit loose in how I said it, but I was like, "He's done. His career's over." You know, said it casually, but not realizing how important. Next thing you know, headline: Rainford-Brent ends Cook's career, says he's over. Wow. So, you know, when you're like, that wasn't my intention. I wasn't trying to make a headline, but obviously in the media, if you say a strong statement, it's going to. So anyway, a few times he winds me up now when I see him. Obviously, he ended up having the best ever comeback, made some like double century at Melbourne. Twitter went crazy at me. Yeah, there you go. You ended his career and, you know, all that. But he winds me up about it now because it actually got through to him as a player. And so the fact that, you know, you realize you're a no-name broadcaster, but you say something, becomes a headline, and cricket will see it, players see it. It can get frosty when you're trying to do an interview. So then you become aware, like, decide when you're going to go in on a headline and when you're just saying what you need to say. So sometimes you want to make a point and you know that this may make a headline, fine, you accept it. And then others just keep it just below the headlines, So it's all part of the learning of broadcasting.
Absolutely. Well, Ebony, we could speak for literally hours, right? You've done so much and you have so many incredible insights and things to share. But we want to be respectful of your time because, yeah, we could. It feels like there's a part two definitely to come. But I just wanted to maybe end on, could you give us like a piece of leadership advice that you think our audience would really benefit from, that could seriously help them? And we've had all sorts of incredible advice in the Power and Purpose series. We're on series 2 now, and so you've done so many things. Is there a piece of leadership advice that maybe sits across being an athlete, broadcaster, and someone who's in the boardroom as a leader?
Yeah, I think 2 quick ones. I would say leading, like in terms of groups of people, it sounds corny, but be authentic and demonstrate what you want others to believe in, So like walk the walk yourself so that you're not having to convince people that you're believable. You actually demonstrate it. And then I think the other in places like boardrooms is make the business case. I used to start by making the emotional case of why we should make change. Once you get higher up, people want to know the numbers and the impact. So if you want to make influence, focus on the business case with a bit of emotion, but focus more on that. And I think that gets you further in the boardrooms as well.
Well, a wonderful piece of advice to
Amazing.
End on. Ebony, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything you're doing. Like, we don't get an opportunity to say thank you to people, So this podcast has provided a good vehicle for that. But thank you for everything you're doing for the game, for the sport, for communities. We've really enjoyed listening to you, and we know that our community has also enjoyed. I'm sure that they'll be in the comments, and I'm encouraging them to share and subscribe, etc. But thank you very much for coming on to the Power and Purpose podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you again very soon.